Good evening, Mr. Mayor. We have Councillor Mayette and Councillor Schreider absent this evening. We have all other members present, so you may begin.
Thank you, Linda. Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call to order this Committee of the Whole meeting of the Council of the Town of Saugeen Shores and welcome all members and welcome everyone who is watching us on the live stream this evening. We're glad that you're with us. The second item on the agenda is disclosures of pecuniary interest, and I'll ask any member if you have one of those you'd like to declare at this time. Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a pecuniary interest on the delegation this evening as one of the members is a relative of mine.
Okay, thank you. Any other disclosures to start? Seeing none, of course, you can do that anytime if you need to. We have no additions, deletions, or amendments. We have no open forum. So that moves us on to delegations. And we do have one delegation, and it's from Gord Lamont and Jordan McKinnon. And of course, just remind the delegation that we have 10 minutes. So we'll appreciate it if you can keep within that time frame. And there's Jordan. I see him. We have Gord with us. Oh, there he is. All right.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We have the two Gords with us, actually. Gord Lamont and Gord McKay, both trying to figure out Zoom, possibly for the first time ever. Thank you for allowing us to present here tonight. As soon as our PowerPoint pops up here. Just give you a little background on who we are and what we're doing. Go to the next slide, please. The Saugeen Shores Winterhawks have been a member of the WAA Senior AA Hockey League since 2007. We are four-time Senior AA champions, and if you ever want to hear about any of those, just ask the Deputy Mayor. He would love to tell you all about them. We are a not-for-profit organization, so every dollar that we bring in goes back into our team operations or community endeavors. And to that tune, we have generated at least $100,000, probably much more, towards our community over the past 14 years between our 50-50 and our Jersey Nights and different fundraisers that we've done. We always manage to put some money back into our community, and we're very proud of that. Next slide, please. Our organization, Gord Lamont is the president, Gordy McKay is the vice president, and you go down there to our executive and so on. Next slide, please. So our first request tonight is one I'm going to pass over to Gordy McKay, but we are asking it for council's permission to license the spectator area of the Plex during Winterhawks home games, and I'll turn it over to Gordy since he's our license holder.
Many years ago, Brian Johnson was a liquor inspector, and he suggested that council consider licensing the stands, and you can license the lobby. You can license any part of the arena you want. At that time, council decided not to go ahead with that. But I think now that we've experienced the COVID, it makes it a lot more difficult to run a licensed area if you have to distance and wear masks. And until last Friday, there was a restriction on capacity, which apparently was lifted on Friday. So my understanding is that the area upstairs can go back to its normal capacity from the province. Whether the council decides to follow that, that's up to them. But when it was looking like we were only going to be able to have a certain number of people in the Hawk's Nest upstairs, it made sense to ask to get the stands licensed. Many of the other arenas in our loop with the WA are already licensed. Clinton and I think other towns, Ripley, Lucknow, they're all licensed. The stands are licensed. I've heard through the grapevine that they're going to be allowing the stands to be licensed for the upcoming curling what's coming in February. So we thought this would be a perfect time. It's been recommended by the liquor inspector, so I don't think they would have a problem with it. It comes down to the municipality, and I think this might be the time to, by the time people get into the Hawk's Nest and get their beer and get back out on the ice, it's never been a problem for me, but a lot of people have trouble even finishing one beer. You know, and for us to make any money we got to sell product, and I think this would go a long way. I would also like to put a plug in for an ATM. I know the Winterhawks would like to see a cash machine somewhere within the Plex. We think this would help sales at the licensed area, but it also help with the people running the food booths. Gordon Lamont's skate sharpening, he's always being asked to make change, or we don't have the debit machines in the building. So there are members of the Winterhawks who would be prepared to fund an ATM if the municipality doesn't want to. And I think they've been asked in the past, but we think it'd be a plus for us and for minor hockey and everybody involved. So that's all I have to say. I'll turn it back to Jordan.
Yeah, thank you. Next slide, please. So we have a few things we'd like to get on your radar. These are not meant to be criticisms of the Plex. It's just recognizing that it's 22 years old. It doesn't show it, but there are some things that we would like to see. The wish list, I guess you could say. So the first thing that we'd like is expansion of the club room or our own dressing room. The club room is very cramped. You can see from that picture, there's 6 guys in that picture. And that's roughly half the club room, maybe a little less than half the club room. And we need to fit on during non-COVID times, we got to put 14 more guys in there, plus coaches and trainers. So they don't fit very well. And now with COVID restrictions, we can't get everybody into that dressing room. We're going to be using the storage room just off the outside of the club room in the arena. So we don't have any room for amenities for our players or coaches. There's hardly even room for our coaches to sit down. So it is something that we would love to see at some point in time. And it is worth noting that all of the other teams, if not the vast majority of the other teams in our league, have their own dedicated dressing room, but we do not. Next slide, please. Upgrading some or all of the spectator area to stadium seating. 22 years ago when the Plex was built, bench seating was the standard, that was accepted, that was the way it was. Since then, a number of new arenas have been built, and I'm not aware of any of them that are of a size similar to the Plex that does not have stadium seating. We have a number of fans that are seniors, and they often complain about the benches, sore backs, sore butts. The arenas in our area that are new, Hanover, Mount Forest, Listowel, Clinton, Goderich, they all have stadium seating. It would make life easier for the Winterhawks because we would be able to sell assigned seats. We have tried in the past to have assigned seats for our season ticket holders, and we had to put those awful bumper stickers on the benches, and it didn't work out well for anybody. So something in this regard, it's all about fan experience and making it as comfortable as possible for people. Next slide, please. Installation of an LED video board. This is might be more of a pipe dream than anything else, but certainly the LED video boards are coming down in price all the time. And this is something that we think could be a win-win for both the Winterhawks and the municipality. It could be a tremendous sponsorship opportunity if you had rolling sponsorship on a video board throughout, throughout events at the Plex. You'd be able to adapt your messaging for upcoming events and that sort of thing, PSAs, whatever you want. Certainly for our use, we would love to be able to roll our sponsors through and give them a little extra perk for sponsoring the Winterhawks. And video capability is something that will be expected of teams like us in the very near future. And if we could have a camera set up that could feed in replays or something like that, even if we can show highlights during the intermission or something, anything, it would be a huge plus. And I think it could be a revenue maker for both of us. And again, it would enhance the fan experience within the Plex. Next slide, please. And Gordy already touched on this, the ATM vending machines. Again, we are cash only events. So our potential revenue is whatever people have in their pockets when they walk in. Before the pandemic, people didn't carry much cash, and I'm willing to bet they carry even less now. So this is something we absolutely have to have. in some shape or form. If we have an ATM machine, especially if the Winterhawks run it, we can make some money off it via service charges. If we install a debit machine, we pay off of our sales. So it makes only sense for us to stay cash only and have an ATM machine somewhere in the Plex. And we would also be interested in taking over the vending machines that are in the lobby. It's just another thing that we could take off the town's hands and look after and maybe make a few bucks off of. So these are things that just want to get on your radar, and we're not putting a gun to anybody's heads. They're not demands, but it's something we love to talk about. Next slide, please. And thank you. I'll turn it back over, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, thanks, Jordan, and Gord for your presentation. And we'll ask if there are questions or comments from members of the committee. Vice Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Jordan and Gord, for your presentation. And you make a good point about the Tankard coming up. The interior of Tankard in February, and I think that's signs are leading to potentially obviously licensing the seats, and so I think this is setting a standard if that actually gets formally approved. And Mr. Mayor, I don't know whether it has been formally approved yet, but I know that request has come forward. And I'm just wondering, Jordan, Gord, one question I do have about licensing, which I can support in today's age, is would there be consideration given to a family section? I guess is not every spectator family wants to sit in sections where alcohol is being consumed and they want to enjoy the game as a family. Is that something that you've thought about, and is something that you can think about if this council decides that licensing the seats is a good idea? Have you talked about a family section at all?
We haven't put the cart before the horse yet. It's certainly something we could consider. I mean, we typically have sections, I say towards the south end where the visitors come out, that would have fewer fans in them, that we could set something like that up. So it's certainly something we could absolutely accommodate if need be.
Just something to think about. And I think, Mr. Mayor, I'm sure other members of the council want to chime in here on this one, but I think it's important to send this back to, to staff, obviously, for a staff report recommendation, to see what thoughts are from staff's perspective. And hopefully they may look at it as being something that's favorable. So I look forward to hearing back from staff. Jordan, I get it about the club room. I've been in that room, and for 10, 12 players, it's fine. But when you get 20 grown men in there, it's not sized the way it should be sized. And I think that's something we should be looking at in the future. There's always, the cost factor. I know we're looking at, rec complex expansion here potentially. Is it partnering with the Y, or we're doing our own rec center, and what does that look like, and could it be built into that plan? But I think it's something that staff again should meet with you people just to talk about some ideas, and it's going to eventually come back to the council table as a cost involved. But I hope that conversation continues, and ATM I think is a good idea, and again it'd be interesting to hear from staff what their recommendation would be coming back on that. The concessions, I wouldn't mind knowing, not the concessions, but rather the machines and the pop machines and so on and so forth. I don't know whether we make a whole lot of money on those machines. I'd be interested to hear in the future, Mr. Mayor, what that means to the town from a revenue stream. I don't think it's a whole ton of money. I think it's more of a service, and that's something that should be continued. But it'd be interesting to hear from staff what if any money would be losing on something like that. I don't think it's a whole pile. So I think some of those are good changes, and I know we have a senior A team now, a senior team now. But what if club room changes and the armrest seating, and I think are good things that maybe someday, who knows, maybe there'll be a tier 2 or junior hockey team here that we need to make some of these changes in the future anyway. So just lots to think about. I think it's a good presentation, and a few things I could get behind. So thanks for your presentation.
Yeah, and I think just in following up with response, I suppose, to your comments, Vice Deputy Mayor, I think we can ask staff to give us a report in response to everything that's been raised here by these gentlemen this evening. So it doesn't have to be this evening, Jane, but at some point in the coming, short while, particularly on the question of licensing, I think we'd want to hear that something on that relatively soon, because I understand these folks would probably like to move that forward quickly for this season. But on some of the longer term stuff, we could get a report to outline what the possibilities are and how we can move forward. Did you want to make a comment, Jane?
Yeah, I can just share with council that the long-term 5-year capital forecast does identify some of these capital commitments at the same time as a potential aquatic center addition to the facility as well.
Good. Yeah. Well, so we can get a report back and hear some more about that and have another discussion. The Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The Vice Deputy Mayor touched on a lot of the points that I wanted to mention. I want to start first with the ATM. There is no ATM in this section of town. The closest one in the north end of town is at the gas station, or ex-Chapel's gas station at Market Street. So when you're out here at this end, there's nowhere really to get any money. And as Jordan said, nobody really carries money anymore. So when you come in, it's easier if you have the cash machine there. So our biggest deal would be to see where you can put it for security wise. That's good. As far as the pop machines for the Vice Deputy Mayor, they don't make what they could make because they're mostly broke down, and the only people who come to fix them is Pepsi or Coke itself. A bottle gets jammed in there and it'll sit for 1, 2, 3 weeks. Now, if somebody was looking after it, say the Winterhawks or whomever, that would be up and fixed within a day, and it would generate more cash. I like the idea of the stadium seating. As Jordan also said, we're 20 some years old now. It's time to start to update the facility. Stadium seating is required. And because we were supposed to have had heated seating in there, there is no heated seating. It is hard on the backside for a lot of people. As I get older, I don't like sitting on the wooden seats myself. So stadium seating and the club room, the Vice Deputy Mayor said it, you can't fit a full team in there. Should something happen that the senior A team is not here anymore and we go back to a junior team, you still can't put them in there. I've said this for the last 6, 7 years, that when we look at adding a new ice pad to the Plex, I think we should take that alcove that faces west and extend all the way down like Tankard has done and put all the home dressing rooms on one side, making a big club room and home dressing rooms. Everybody comes out in the one spot, and then the second ice pad and visitors take dressing rooms 1 to 5 down the corridor. Everything that Jordan's has asked is what we need to do to upgrade our facility. So I like the idea of staff coming back to us. The clock, it has a sponsor that's not there anymore. The time clock is dated. It needs to be replaced. So yes, I look forward to those reports, and hopefully we can work something out that makes this the place to be.
Very good. Further questions or comments? I guess, Jane, are you still there? Is it possible to get a report on licensing in relatively short order? Is that something we can do soon?
We can certainly try our best for next council meeting. Well,
that would be good, and much appreciated. I know it's sort of something to jam into your busy workload, but I think I can appreciate that it's something that would make a big difference to the Winterhawks. So I'd like us to advance that discussion. And the other comment I'll make on the question of ATMs, I think I'm not opposed to an ATM in the Plex, and it's something that we could move forward. In my own conception, in my own business, I often think that the ATM before too long is going to look a bit like the phone booth, because nobody's going to use cash at all. And in my own business, we're down to 10% cash and 90% debit credit, and it's just heading south fast. And I think what you find when you convert to taking credit and debit, even though it does come with a cost, is that your sales expand so dramatically that those costs are quickly overcome. So I think it would be a good idea, and I don't know if that technology is supported in the Plex in terms of the type of telephone internet connections that you'd need to run those systems. But if they're not, I think we should probably do those upgrades, because I really think that in the end, before too long, doing business anywhere is going to mean accepting credit and debit, because that's all anybody's going to have. So I think that maybe we should try to talk about advancing those two things in tandem. Make sure that we have an ATM, and like I say, I don't certainly in support of that if it's something we can arrange, but also make sure that everybody who's using the Plex can set up an ATM or a debit terminal to accept credit and debit. Anyway, those are all the comments that I have, and so thanks very much, Jordan and Gord. We appreciate you guys coming in this evening. Sounds like we're going to get a report to talk further about some of your suggestions, so we appreciate you making them, and we'll keep talking about these things and moving them forward. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
So we will move on then. No more delegations. So we're on to public meetings. We don't have any of those. And that moves on to report of municipal officers and committees. And 7.2, general government. And the first is a staff report on the market salary survey review. And we'll turn it over to the acting director of corporate services.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm happy to introduce Jane Mizanski, who with Gallagher has taken on the task of reviewing the market data that we collected from our comparators in accordance with our compensation policy. The last time the survey was done was in 2016 and brought for Council's consideration, I believe it was in 2017. Jane will be presenting the findings from this data and recommendations for your consideration. Welcome, Jane.
Okay, thank you. And my apologies, I put my hand up in that other comment, but I couldn't figure out how to get it off. So, okay. So the town of Saugeen Shores, non-union. This is specifically to the non-union employee group. So I just want to make sure that that's clear. Go to the slide. Okay. So just in terms of background, so the town had initiated a market review a little earlier this year, I believe, to make sure that they were externally competitive to the marketplace. It's always a good best practice to make sure that you test the market, that you're competitive, that you're not lagging the market or at risk of losing some of your valuable employees, and ensure that you're able to attract and retain on an ongoing basis. So it's really a good best practice to do this kind of a review. The policy that you have in place right now that I believe was implemented in the 2016 review, 2017 review is to undertake a policy review every 5 years. Again, that's not bad. When the marketplace is very, static, 5 years is okay. However, as the next bullet point indicates, the market sector right now is extremely active and very aggressive. We do have the silver tsunami that has kind of shown itself in the municipal sector. There are a number of job families that are particularly showing as vulnerable to losing good quality staff or having hard to recruit positions. And those include at your senior management level and the leadership roles. Sometimes you're having those positions retire, but perhaps within your own municipality, your next layer down is not ready to take on those senior leadership roles. So if everybody across the province is competing for those roles, it's kind of a buyer's market kind of thing. Building and inspection, chief building inspection officers and building inspectors are highly competitive right now. Planning is also showing to be quite competitive. And then there are a number of finance positions that are proving very difficult to recruit for. So that's kind of the stage that has been set that the review is taking place in. So as I said, you initiated the review in early 2021, but as I understand, there were some staff transitions within the HR department that caused Janice to reach out and connect with me to help basically pull the information together, validate the information, and see what we could come up with in terms of finalizing the analysis for council's consideration. Next slide. Just in terms of who I am or where I come from. So I'm part of the Gallagher Benefit Services Canada group. We do have a specialized HR and compensation practice that was formed by merging two smaller boutique companies. McDowell Associates came in 2015, and then the Encompass Group was acquired by Gallagher in 2019. So Gallagher is a much broader insurance and risk-based organization. We've, in the HR and compensation team, we have in-depth expertise working with all kinds of compensation data, all different kinds of job evaluation tools, the processes to get you to having a total rewards design program. In particular, in our organization, we feel that we are the pay equity and job evaluation design and implementation, that these are our core skills and competencies within the firm. We are known amongst the legal firms for assisting organizations through their pay equity challenges at the review services as well. And we have our own job evaluation tools that we have implemented across a number of organizations in Ontario and then across Canada as well. A lot of experience in developing and communicating compensation philosophies in pay policy being where are you paying? Are you paying at the 50th percentile, the 60th, or lower, which is not something that I would recommend. And then designing some of these market-based pay structures for the organization. Myself in particular, I'm a senior consultant with the firm, and I have been with Gallagher since 2013, well, the McDowell Associates and then Gallagher. Prior to that, I was a manager of total rewards in a public sector organization. Okay, next slide. So the approach that we took when we took on the assignment is, first of all, we reviewed the comparator list. It's important that you have the right comparators in order to make sure that you're assessing yourself against the right comparator group or the right competitors that you might have, or other organizations that are having similar challenges or similar characteristics as the town of Saugeen Shores. The comparator group was established when I arrived onto the assignment. So this is what was presented to me as the town of Blue Mountains, Brockton, and so forth. There's quite a variety. I definitely support them. There's similar size. You would evaluate them on the basis of, do they have similar budgets? Do they have the same number of employees? Scope of services. You don't want to have a comparator group that doesn't offer the same kinds of activities or mandates that you have. Otherwise, the information is useless. Okay, next slide. So the analysis that was completed prior to arriving on scene, there were 17 of the 56 positions in the non-union group that were evaluated or benchmarked. They fall into 15 different pay bands. And so the comparator organizations were given a survey, they were given job profiles and said, what job in your organization matches this job and what is the salary rate for that position? Typically, when you're doing the evaluation or the comparison, you would say, well, do they have similar scope of responsibilities, accountabilities? Do they have the same qualifications and skills that we're looking for in our job? And if it's a leadership job, what's the scope of all of the responsibilities that fall within that person's or that position's purview? So I reviewed the job matches that were completed. And I actually did go back into the data and I supplemented additional benchmark information to make sure that we had a good, robust database, such as it is, in terms of making sure that we had some confidence in what we were going to present in terms of a market competitiveness. Are you competitive or not? And then to use that information also to support a new salary grid, recommending a new salary grid that aligns to your established target pay policy. Your target pay policy is the 50th percentile, so the middle of the market, plus 5%. This was established by the review in 2016, 2017. Next slide, thank you. So when we look at all of the data across all of the different comparator positions that we had, or benchmark positions, you're not too bad. You are within the competitive range. Usually we say anywhere between plus or minus 10% is competitive range. Ideally, you want to be within the plus or minus 5%. Anything beyond that is a job that you consider is a job at risk. You have the chance that someone might poach your employees if they're being paid less than, like if there's a gap of 5% roughly, or 10% to what the going rate is in the marketplace. So on aggregate, you're 3.1%, you have a gap that you are below the market on an annual basis, and 3% gap below the market on an hourly basis. Reason there's a slight difference there is that not all organizations across the municipal sector have the same hours of work. Some will have a 20/80 or a 40-hour work week. Others will have a 35-hour work week for the exact same position. So we do the comparison on both bases just to make sure that we're capturing a total picture. Of the 15 bands, the pay bands that we have, in terms of developing the job rates for those positions or for those pay bands, looking at the marketplace, we take a look at the market, we take a look at what are the current job rates that the incumbents have, and then we have some mathematical symmetry that we have to include when we recommend a job rate, and I'll show that when I go on to the next slide. But we've maintained your current 5-step structure. There's approximately 3.3% between steps, so we've maintained that structure. The intent behind this review was really to just take the market data, translate it, and create the salary grid. So you have 13 of those 15 bands that are going to be adjusted to the market rate, or that is the recommendation, is that they be moved to the market rate because they were showing as being low to market. Bands 1 and 2, those positions that had benchmark data in them, are showing that they're fairly competitive. So there was no rationale to move them off of their current job rate that they have. It's important to note that of those 15 bands, that doesn't include the CAO position in the analysis. Basically, it's what we do see in the municipal sector right now is the CAO position tends to come off of the grid and become an employee of the council, and therefore the salary is negotiated between employee and council. So that's something to just keep in mind. So this is the salary grid. As you see, we have 15 bands. This is being presented on an annual basis. Obviously, we have an hourly chart that goes with it as well. And in terms of speaking to the symmetry, so if we look at that last column on the far right side of the screen, the job rate is the 100% rate that we would be benchmarking against the comparator organizations. We don't typically benchmark level 1, level 2, or level 3 or 4 with the comparator organizations because everybody has slightly different step structure. So we always look at what's the maximum job rate that an incumbent could receive for a position. And then when we're looking at that, we also want to make sure that between each band that there is sufficient amount of distance between one band and another, because if you have them too close together, we have what's called compression. So if you have a manager in, let's say for argument's sake, band 9, and one of their direct reports is sitting in band 8, if the salaries are too close together, there's not enough incentive to say, take on the pleasures of being in management or in a managerial role and all the good, bad, and ugly that goes with that to make it worth the money to go into the higher level position. So that's why we like to keep an eye on the compression there as well. Okay, next slide. So having done the market analysis, we validated the information, we created an updated market grid or salary adjusted grid, a market adjusted grid. And so we're recommending for your consideration to approve the grid. It's been a long period of time that since that grid had been updated for market considerations. And then when we did the costing for the incumbents to be placed into that new grid, we would take whatever step they are at right now. So if they're at step 4 in their current grid, we would move them to step 4 in the new grid. And then the recommended effective date is November 8th, 2021. Okay, that's it.
Okay, thank you, Jane and Janice. Questions for members of the committee? Councillor Carr.
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Mayor. I guess this is going to be directed toward Janice. I guess the question here, so the first question I've got has to do with how this works. So we've looked at non-union members here only. If I'm not mistaken, in the last contract, union is going to be treated the same as non-union. Am I mistaken in that?
Through you, Mayor. No, Councillor Carr, you are absolutely correct. I actually met with the union this morning just to make sure that we're on the same page. And I assured them that just because this was our first group to be brought to council didn't mean in any way that their review wasn't also proceeding. We're just further along with this group than with their market data. But the collection of comparator information was done at the same time. So we'll be proceeding with recommendations for that group separately.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, Mr. Mayor, to follow up on that. I guess so. Basically, if we approve this report, though, we're basically approving what we're going to do for unionized members. Then is that the way I'm understanding that?
Their market data may look different. There may be some bands that were already competitive, and others may have switched, just as we're seeing with the non-union grid. So it will be very specific to the data and what it's telling us we need to do to stay market competitive.
So I guess myself, to be more comfortable with this whole thing, I think I'd prefer to see a whole report come forward to include both groups, because I guess when I go down, my next question was going to go to, so the $55,000, I see that it's going to affect our 2021 budget. That's just for what, the last 2-3 months that it's going to affect? Is that, am I correct in assuming that?
Yes, we did the costing based on an implementation of November 8th to give staff the opportunity to make the proper adjustments to have the system updated in time to launch. As of November 8th was the earliest we thought that was reasonable to happen.
Okay, so sorry, Mr. Mayor, again, just to follow up on that. So the way I would look at that, and then, so that 55,000 this year could turn into 250 to 350 next year. Is that the way I would interpret that?
There is an annualized
12 months as opposed to, you know, a couple of months here that we're figuring out at the end of the year.
Correct.
Okay, I just wanted to be clear on that. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, okay. Further questions or comments? Vice Deputy Mayor.
The comment I wanted to make, Mr. Mayor, it's, you know, yeah, it's probably, you know, $250,000, $300,000 could mean 2% in a budget next year overall increase just with wages for this, one category, and it doesn't include the unionized. But, you know, I think that it's really important we did this, to maintain our position in attracting top-rate people across the province of Ontario wanting to come to Saugeen Shores. We need to remain competitive, be competitive, and to find the very best. And there's a cost associated with that, you know, to find the very best people, and we will do that. You know, there's going to be a recruitment taking place next little while for a couple of positions, and we will find excellent people. But if we fall behind, you know, then we're not going to be as competitive. So I think it's great what we did here, and thank you to our CEO and Janice for all your great work, and Jane for your presentation this evening, and I'll certainly be supporting this recommendation.
Okay, thank you. Further questions from members? Don't see anything, and I would just support what the Vice Deputy Mayor said. We've always been very careful to maintain the non-union wages at a competitive rate, always maintaining, except for the rarest exception, cost of living increases annually for the non-union positions, and making sure that the grid is competitive is an important component of that. As the Vice Deputy Mayor said, we want to be able to recruit well, and this is what's going to enable us to do that. We're a growing community, and we're going to need more staff to continue to keep up with our growth, and we're going to need to be able to recruit them here to do the work that we need them to do. And so, you know, this is an important step in that process. So certainly has my support, and there is a recommendation that Council approve the recommendations by Gallagher Benefit Services Canada Group Incorporated, and that staff be directed to implement the new 2021 non-union salary grid effective November 8, 2021. If there's nothing further, then I'll ask all in favor. Opposed? That's carried. All right, thank you very much. That moves us on to our second report, which is a staff report on audit services contract renewal, and then we'll turn it over to the treasurer.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. With the conclusion of the 2020 audit work, the town's contract for audit services with BDO is set to expire after a 5-year contract that was initiated in 2016 is completed. Staff approached BDO about extending or renewing the contract and received the attached proposal. The proposal includes all existing services with a nominal rate increase in 2021 and the option of extending for 2 years with no further increase. Staff believe that the proposal is a very fair offer, which provides value to the town, and are recommending retaining BDO through 2023 based on the advantages that they offer over other firms and the reasonable price included in their proposal.
Thank you, Daniel. There's a recommendation. I'll read it, then we can take questions or comments. It's recommended that Council appoint BDO Canada LLP as external auditors for the 2021 to 2023 fiscal years and authorize staff to enter into an agreement for audit services for the town and Bruce Area Solid Waste Recycling as per the attached proposal. Is there questions or comments? Seeing none, all in favor? That's carried. That moves us then on to the third report, which is, a staff report on corporate information technology acceptable use policy. And we'll turn it over to the interim director of corporate services.
Thank you. I worked with Darren Hill, our manager of IT, to update an existing policy to make it more generic in terms of branding of our IT services, but the intent of the overall policy is twofold. One is to make sure that our systems and our data are protected and the integrity is maintained. And then the next element relates more to an HR function where we're ensuring that how those tools are used is appropriate and not in violation of any human rights legislation or any other actions that would draw harm to the town or reputation or, violate any employment law. So it serves those two purposes. And we're comfortable that, we've brought it into a current standard from the last time that it was reviewed. So happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you, Janice. Then there is a recommendation that council approve the information technology acceptable use policy. And is there questions or comments from members? I don't see any, so all in favor? That's carried. Okay, thank you. That moves us then on to 7.6, communications for action. And there's one item there, which is a letter from the optometrists of Saugeen Shores regarding Ontario government underfunding of eye care. Any direction from the committee? Vice Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to thank the optometrists of Saugeen Shores, first of all, for sending in this piece of correspondence. I had prepared a motion for this evening. Hopefully we'll get a seconder for it, but I'd like to read it to you, and hopefully this is procedurally the right way to do this, but I just want to propose, Mr. Mayor, that the town of Saugeen Shores, and I sent this to our clerk today in anticipation of this item this evening, so she has the wording, but I'll just read it anyways, that the town of Saugeen Shores supports OHIP supported eye care, and further that the municipality encourages the Ontario Association of Optometrists and Province of Ontario to resolve the payment of eye exam dispute in a way that is fair to both taxpayers and eye care professionals, and further that this issue be resolved as quickly as possible, Mr. Mayor. So I'd like to, if that's the procedure, if I can make that a motion, you can help me out with that, Linda, if that's the correct way to do it.
Is there a seconder for the motion? Councillor Grace. Is there any discussion? Councillor Smith.
Thank you. I would just like to, through this, there are a number of local optometrists who are not only healthcare professionals in our community, but also integral supporters of many programs that exist, and anything that we can do to support them in this endeavor to provide fair and equitable payment for their services, I certainly hope that we will do.
Thank you. Any other comments to the resolution as presented? Seeing none, you've heard it. All in favor? That's carried. Very good. So that will come forward to regular council in 2 weeks. And that moves us forward with communications for information. Any questions or comments with regard to any of those 4 items? I don't see any, so we'll move on from there to reports of department heads. And the first one is an information report on the Ambassador Beach program for 2021. And the Director of Community Services, do you have any comments you want to make to that?
Yeah, just really quickly, I wanted just to give a recap of the program this year. It was an education and enforcement for users using the beach in regards to ensuring compliance of COVID-19 protocols, as well as the Parks Bylaw 54, 2019. It was certainly a combined effort, utilizing bylaw and special constables, as well as police constables who monitored the entire waterfront for 16 weeks. Staff are going to continue to review the results that we've acquired this year, and for 2022, really determine if COVID funding could assist in the continuation of the success of the program. Thanks.
Very good. Any questions or comments for the director? I think it's a good report, and it was a great program, and it's great to hear that we're going to try to find a way to get it to continue, because I think it was very good. So thanks for the report. Item 2 is an information report on workplace vaccination verification, and the acting director, corporate services.
Thank you. We've been monitoring the vaccine policy developments across the province in various municipalities. And there was also speakers that represented various law firms at conferences over the last month or so, providing their comments and direction as well. All agree that in developing a policy, we need to make sure that it's reasonable in the circumstances, and in that end, or to that end, we need to understand what our circumstances are. So the first step is to gather data that identifies what level of vaccination status our employees currently have achieved. And we aim to do that through a voluntary disclosure so that we get a strong understanding of whether there is significant work to be done through a policy to get that high level of vaccination that public health assures us is the best course of action during this pandemic. So we will be pursuing that collection of information from our staff, and we'll be reporting back to council with the next steps as appropriate, depending on what that information tells us.
All right, very good. I'll just make a couple of comments right off the bat. I think so. You may have heard at our last meeting at Bruce County Council, we passed a vaccination policy for the county, and Dr. Era was present at that meeting, and we were talking during his portion of the meeting about the reason for these vaccination policies. And it's about, ultimately, it's not about being punitive against any particular group in our community or in society. It's about getting that vaccination rate, the aggregate vaccination rate, up to what public health is saying we need, which is about 90% now. And we're not close to that number yet. It's come to the point where we need to do more to encourage more people to get vaccinated so that we can, so that ultimately we can do away with these policies. As I said at Bruce County, and I believe it as much here, it's my strong hope that, if we have a vaccination policy, that one day I'll get to cast a vote rescinding it, because I don't see it as a permanent step. It's an interim step to get us to a point. With that being said, we do need to make progress, and I think the public expects us to make progress in getting to a point where we do have a policy in place, whatever that policy looks like. And I think that the voluntary disclosure is a good idea to start, but I think your report is very open-ended with regard to that, and I don't think we can be that open-ended. I think we need to say, voluntary disclosure for a period of 2 weeks. That should be plenty of time for anybody who will voluntarily disclose to do so. And then you and staff can take that information and craft a policy and come back to this council. And I do think that we, as a council, as a municipality, need to have a policy. It isn't a question. The report makes it seem like it's a question of if, but I really do think it needs to be a question of when. I think ultimately we are going to have one, and we need staff to return with one, whatever it looks like, and get it in place. And I think the county has struck a pretty good balance in terms of what it has done for the time being, not punitive, and with options, but also with a strong set of rules to encourage staff to get vaccinated. So anyway, I guess those are my thoughts, and I would very much like to see us do a shortened voluntary disclosure period, and I would very much like to see staff come back, the plan to craft a policy on the basis of that disclosure, and return to this council for it to be debated, and I hope ultimately approved. So those are my thoughts. I'll open it up to other thoughts, the Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And through you, I appreciate your comments there. My question is, what's the difference between discretionary and mandatory? We're not going to be forcing people to be taking the vaccine. It's to give our HR staff, Janice particularly, the numbers to know what everybody who's employed by Saugeen Shores, where they are in the status. So if we do a voluntary 2-week survey, what if only 50% of the people fill it in, and whether the other 50% are not vaccinated, they just say, I'm not doing it. We're not really getting a good number. I look at the education field. Every member in every school had a form to fill out to say whether they are vaccinated or not. That gives us a good understanding of where they are. It's not forcing anybody to be vaccinated. It just gives HR the idea so that when they go to craft a policy, they have true understanding of what the numbers actually say. So I kind of teeter with the discretionary as towards mandatory. I would lean more toward having everybody fill out the form. And again, it's private. It goes only to HR. They're the only ones who know the true numbers. But from there, that's how they can create the policy that needs to come forward. And as you said, Mr. Mayor, so that in the near future, we can say, well, we don't need this anymore.
You have any comments to that, Janice?
No, it's fair. Absolutely, we've been tracking. We have copies of other policies, including the policy and procedure from Bruce. So we've already drafted a policy, and it's just a matter of, finding out where we are already to be prepared, because the reaction will be when you find out that someone isn't vaccinated, the first step is ordinarily then to extend the opportunity to do an education session to make sure that information that is coming from public health is shared with our staff to gain stronger understanding of what the vaccination is, and to try to address some of the rumors that are out there and misunderstandings to provide clarity to people. The second thing that we want to do is ensure that anyone that isn't yet vaccinated has opportunities to do so now with that new information available to them. So to provide that window as well. And also to identify if we have any employees who have a medical exemption. And under the Ontario Human Rights Code, of course, we have a duty to accommodate anyone with a medical disability that would exclude them from voluntarily having a vaccination. So we'll have to work with them to find out if there are other special arrangements we need to take to accommodate those individuals. And then the group remaining are those that, for philosophical reasons, are not willing or interested in vaccinating, and we'll have to address that fourth group. So.
Further questions or comments from any member? Vice Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I think, I guess the question I have, Janice, we today as a municipality have really, I'm not going to say no idea, but we don't have really a concrete number in terms of how many of our employees, full-time, part-time, are double vaccinated. We don't have that number today. Is that correct?
That is correct. We have anecdotal information based on voluntary verbal disclosures people have made, but we don't have anything that has actually any validity. Yeah.
I think the fact is for me anyways, it's a question of health and safety, and this is not new information around the world in terms of we're keeping our employees safe, we're keeping members of the public safe. You know, lots of people come into our facilities now have to be double vaccinated. Hockey players are out on the ice on benches with coaches. You know, they're not wearing masks. They're not wearing masks on ball fields. They're not wearing masks on benches. They're not wearing masks on soccer fields. But these people are, you know, coming in contact with some of our employees on a day-to-day basis, whether they pass each other in the hallway or where they may cross paths. But for me, I agree with you, Mr. Mayor. I think it's something that has to happen sooner or later. And I know we're looking vaccination, you know, policy, and I guess the question is it leading to, you know, mandatory vaccinations, or is it regular testing that we're going to be requiring? We can't answer that this evening, but I suppose, is that one of the things that we will be talking about, Janice, with the vaccination policy eventually, is which way this council decides to want to go with this. You know, they've done it in, I guess, the city of Toronto and MPPs, and I mean, it's happening. Google today on other municipalities that are looking at mandatory vaccinations, and it's happening elsewhere. It's whether or not we decide we want to go that route. But is that the end goal here, Janice, is to make the determination whether this is a mandatory vaccination policy for all employees versus, you know, regular testing for non-vaccinated? Is that kind of where we're heading eventually?
Yeah, most of the policies do have a provision that if you aren't fully vaccinated, you can meet a standard still by doing the rapid antigen testing before you attend work, and do that twice a week so that you're maintaining your ability to demonstrate that you're COVID negative. So that's one of the considerations that we're giving to our policy as well.
Okay. Well, thanks, Mr. Mayor. For me, it's a health and safety issue. If I had my way, which I don't have my own way, I'd 100% of the people vaccinated. I know that's not going to happen, but wouldn't it be wonderful, and we can get on with life here. So thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Yep. Any further questions or comments? Don't see any. So there's some input from council anyway, Janice, and we'll look forward to seeing the voluntary disclosure move forward, and hope to see a policy back here for consideration soon.
Absolutely. Very
good. Thank you. That moves us then on to item 3, an information report on the employment lands update. And we have the Economic Development Officer, Heather Hyde.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you, a brief update on the employment lands. The planning continues to move through the necessary steps, and we're advancing marketing materials to promote the lands for sale that will launch ahead of the completion. Staff are also advancing the financing strategy for the $4 million in estimated costs to develop and service the Innovation Park, and we'll be bringing more information to council as part of the 2022 capital budget. And I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Questions or comments? Councilor Grace.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you, and thank you, Heather, for the update and the report. I'm just wondering about the, you mentioned 2 potential market values per acre. One at, you know, the range from 150,000 to 175,000 per acre. Is that, does that take into account the current inflation of real estate prices in our area?
Those numbers were provided in the MHBC report, which was delivered to council, I believe, in March, if my memory serves me correctly. So any market fluctuation that's happened since then would not be taken into account.
Okay, but this is something that is not an immediate sale anyway, right? So well, these are done. So I guess
yes, there'll be ample time to review the pricing before we're at that step.
Thank you.
Thank you. Further questions or comments? Vice Premier.
Mr. Mayor, and whether you could answer this question, or Heather, I see Amanda Frost is not on the call this evening, I don't think. With the servicing of the lands, have we 100% ruled out sanitary sewer for those lands? Are we looking at septic beds? Has that been a given that we've agreed on long ago that land definitely won't be serviced with sanitary sewer?
Any comment, Heather?
Yes, so through the MHBC report, it was identified that adding sewer would be very cost prohibitive for those lands. And so the recommendation was to go with septic on an individual lot basis.
Mm. Okay, thank you.
Okay, further questions or comments? I guess I was disappointed that we were not successful with the funding from the Southwest Ontario Development Fund. I thought we had a very strong application for that funding, and it seemed like we had a good opportunity to receive it. I don't know if there are other opportunities through that fund in the future or through other funds from the province, but you know, it's an important economic development project, and I think really has the potential to be regionally significant, and so hopefully we can continue to pursue funding opportunities from the province to offset, or from the federal government or from anywhere else to help offset these costs. I think the town of Saugeen Shores can well afford to construct this new industrial park on our own if we have to, and I honestly believe that it will return dividends to the taxpayer for us to do that. But I think I do think that this kind of project ought to be supported by the province, and so hopefully there's some opportunities in the future to look for funding support for development of the site. But anyway, with that, thanks very much for your report, Heather, and have a good evening.
Thank you.
And that moves us then on to item 4, which is an information report on debt financing and legacy reserve fund and the treasurer.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This report serves as an update to the report on the growth of the Legacy Reserve Fund and the debt capacity of the municipality that was delivered to Council as part of the 2021 budget deliberations. In the spring, I made a commitment to Council to give an update on that initial report to Council during budget. And I'm doing so in conjunction with finalizing the loan application for the Lamont Sports Park. Though there is no direct recommendation in this report, it outlines the potential plans for funding upcoming large projects. The town has built strong fiscal capacity through its contributions to the Legacy Reserve Fund, and both the cash reserves in the fund and the annual contributions to the fund will likely need to be utilized to achieve the town's goals over the next several years. The recommendations to utilize debt for some projects in the near future is to work towards a well-measured and staggered debt schedule, where interest rates are locked in at various points of time over varying terms, all in accordance with the town's debt management policy. I welcome Council's questions or feedback, and staff will continue to come back to Council in the 2022 budget sessions and beyond in order to secure any firm approvals that are needed to fund upcoming projects.
Good, thank you, Daniel. Questions or comments from members of the committee? Vice Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor, and Daniel. Thanks for this report. I think it really, at least for me, and we had a good discussion today about it, you and I think for me, at least, it looks as though from the tax funded perspective, you know, look at that current debt capacity, 20 years, 2.75 at the bottom left-hand side of the chart, and current, you know, debt capacity of 49 million. I mean, we're looking at, you outlined the projects, 30 million for the pool and Lamont 6 million. And so it looks to me as, you know, Daniel, I think the message you're sending to us, we're in pretty good shape financially from the, you know, capital funded debt capacity standpoint, which is good news. I just wondering, you know, Daniel, if you took that bottom line, the debt capacity 20 years at 2.75, and you know, we have room for $49,800,000 and, you know, $2,000 worth of debt capacity. What does 25 years do to that number? and 35-year or 30-year debenturing, rather, 25 and 30 years. I asked you that question today, and I was hoping you might be able to share with council what that would mean.
Yeah. So if all of that debt, the entire payment limit was amortized over 30 years, you'd be looking at roughly $58 to $66 million in debt capacity. For 25-year amortization, you'd be probably looking at 50 to 56, somewhere in that range. So higher than the chart shows, and the longer the amortization periods on the loans, the lower the payments are going to be, and therefore lower impact on your borrowing capacity. The catch is, though, if you amortize over longer periods, then that debt stays with you for longer, and that debt capacity does not come back to you for 20 or 30 years. Whereas with a 10 or 15 or 20-year loan, as those payments drop off, that debt capacity comes back to you for future projects. So something for council to keep in mind, that for these big projects, Lamont Sports Park or an aquatic facility, the capacity is there to take on 20 or 30-year loans for those. If there are more of those projects in the immediate future, that we would need that long-term financing for. That means 10 years from now, 15 years from now, we have slightly increased debt capacity through higher revenues, just as our tax base grows. But you don't get that room back until the loan closes off. So it's really about seeing those long-term goals, and are these goals that are in this report around Lamont Sports Park, the aquatic facility, some needed upgrades at Plex or Coliseum or Town Hall, are those the priorities that are truly the only priorities for the next 20 or 30 years, or are there more priorities in 10 years' time?
Right, and thanks. So just a quick follow-up, and you talked about the staggered debt schedule, and I agree with you. I understand that, 20-year, probably 15, 20 years is still the optimum. Where you get 25, 30, you could have run into some, you're carrying that debt for a very long time. So Daniel, just the last point I want to mention, Mr. Mayor, is when you talk about core infrastructure funding in the capital asset management plan, 6% increases in total capital spending. I suppose, and we're contributing right now $2.4 million per year to our legacy fund. Daniel, in the future, I suppose we would see a report. I mean, this talks a lot about the sports complex, Lamont Sports, the pool complex. And I guess at some point in the future, there's also needs on the road side and the bridge side. And is that something in the future you as treasurer will be bringing forth to council to let us know what that other side looks like as well?
Yeah, so as staff, we certainly hope to continue to bring more funding plans to council for a variety of items, including everything within the core infrastructure and the asset management plan, as part of maybe this budget discussion or future budget discussions, as we tie together the needs from the asset management plan with our funding capacity and what that means for the tax base or different ways of funding that. It's hard to know the grant funding that goes into your capital from year to year. Our roads capital in particular is heavily reliant on provincial and federal funding. So our long-term projections really kind of depend on what level of provincial and federal funding we think we'll receive.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Further questions or comments? Seeing, I just thanks, Daniel, for this presentation, and demonstrates very clearly that the municipality has the capacity to fund the things that we want to fund, that we can easily fund the Lamont Park, which is well underway, and we can fund a new aquatics facility, and we can do that through our own internal financing and advance those projects. And in addition, going forward, fund other important infrastructure projects to improve the quality of life of people in the community. So, the municipality is strongly positioned financially to do these important projects. And, I think your work here really demonstrates that. I was wondering, have you given any thought with regard to the legacy fund contribution, that annual contribution, to starting to think about formulating a policy as to where that should land. I mean, what is the maximum, what is the optimum annual contribution to the legacy fund? I often look at the ARL and think, you know, there's a number. If you maximize the ARL, if the legacy fund annual contribution came close to your annual repayment limit, then you could essentially borrow the entire annual repayment limit. The total, you could borrow the entire debt capacity and fund it going forward. I'm not sure, and then as I think about that, I'm not sure you need to go all the way to the ARL, because you probably are never going to borrow the entire debt capacity. But perhaps some percentage of the ARL would be a good target for the legacy contribution. I don't know. I think it would be a good idea to start to consider bringing to council a general policy for the legacy fund, just like we have for the tax stabilization reserve and other reserves, and say, here's what ought to be held on, ought to be contributed on an annual basis, or what ought to be held in the reserve, and start to put some parameters around it. Because I think we should have a target probably, and go far enough, but not go any further than we need to. I don't know. Have you given any thought to that concept?
I think it's a good suggestion, and basing the suggestion of basing it on a percentage of the ARL is I think would likely make for good policy. So that it can certainly consider that and come back in the future with those parameters around the legacy fund, and maybe seek further direction. It may be in conjunction with kind of what our revenue tools and policy will be in terms of the core infrastructure as well, and starting to separate the funding for legacy fund projects, which may be more all community or recreational in nature versus core infrastructure. And so that's certainly something that we'll look to in the future, maybe just small steps in this upcoming budget process, and then certainly going into more detail in future budget presentations.
Yeah, certainly. I think a broader concept, or a more detailed, fleshed out concept of what the legacy fund is for, what our intentions for it are. I think this council, you know, the previous council started it with the concept of the aquatics facility really in mind. But I suspect if you went around the table, this council might give you a broader range of thoughts for what you might do with legacy fund dollars. And I think that, you know, I think we need to have that discussion, build a policy around it, and so that we can plan for these funds. I mean, you know, we are collecting a lot of, you know, there's quite a lot of taxpayer dollars moving into this reserve. It's I think money well invested by the taxpayer, or will be well invested, but we need to have a really solid reasoning for what we're doing with it, where we're going with it, and what we're going to do to benefit the community with it. So I think you know, it's matured enough now, the legacy fund, that we can start to think more about how we're going to use it, and provide those details to the public so they can have a solid understanding of what council and the municipalities' plans are with these funds that we're collecting. The Vice Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, just to follow up to that, and Daniel, on the chart when our mayor talks about the ARL annual repayment limit, that $8,504,000 is provincially mandated. That 25%. That's where that number comes from, and correct?
That's correct.
And secondly, when we talk about the breakdown of the tax funded 45%, rate funded 30%, contingency fund for emergency situations 25%, those are self-imposed. We set those numbers.
That's correct.
And so when you take a look at those three, how do we, as a council, how do you as a treasurer know like that those numbers 45, 30, and 25 is the right number that we self-imposed? I don't quite understand how we picked those percentages. I understand more of the rate, the water and sewer, but from the tax fund and contingency that makes up 70% of the fund. How did we arrive at those, I wonder?
So it was likely, if you were to combine the contingency 25% with the tax funded 45% to get to that 70%, I would consider that as our general tax revenues of our overall revenues, would be somewhere between 60 and 75% of our overall revenues. Rate funded water and sewer being roughly 30%. It's probably not quite 30% of our overall revenues. So we could certainly take another look with our current, 2021 revenues to see how those percentages have changed from maybe when the policy was put in place. But the idea would have been to associate the debt capacity in the areas where the revenue is generated.
Understood. So that the rate funded water sewer 30%, it could quite possibly be lower than that.
It could be slightly lower than that. Yeah, depending on how those now. Okay. Okay. Yeah, those rates have also been increasing. So
I'm clear now. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions or comments before we move on? Don't see any, so thanks for that, Daniel. And then that moves on to the 2021 Major Initiatives Q3 report and the CAO.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And if council will indulge me for a few minutes tonight, I wanted to highlight some of the initiatives that have happened in the last quarter. So you'll see in this report that we have 32 initiatives that we've been tracking this year. If you add the police services initiatives, that goes up to 39. And finishing out Q3, we are tracking at about 64% of those initiatives completed. So we've started to see the complete list on this report out expand as the months move on. And I just wanted to highlight for those listening in tonight that some of those interesting pieces that have moved forward around the development charges background study, our asset management plan for core infrastructure has been completed. Our accounts payable software has been implemented as of September. The Saugeen Ojibwe Nation land claim was advanced in September. The modernization fund was applied to, and we were successful in receiving 2 grants. And later tonight in council, you'll see an additional application for intake 3 that staff are proposing. And the Saugeen Shores Strong Economic Recovery Strategy was completed. So overall, a lot of exciting things are moving forward in the town of Saugeen Shores. A few of the things we have ongoing in the next couple of months, you heard tonight about the development of the employment lands. Our clerk's department has already started the countdown to next year's municipal election. We're over the 1-year mark. Apparently the clock is up on the wall now, or the sheets are up on the wall marking the countdown. If you haven't seen some of the images, but with Lamont Sports Park, it is moving along quite nicely. It's very impressive, and it's nice to see the finishing touches going into place out there. Our information technology group has been working with clerks to develop an online payment option. And so we're excited to see that's been tested, and we're hoping to roll that out further in the municipality. And as many people are aware, as they travel around town, we've got a number of construction projects that are ongoing with our roads and our public works. When I reviewed the police services update, it was really neat to see the positive ticketing program and the highlight about how that worked this year, and see that positive program moving forward. And I also noted that our building department has an increase of 100% over what we've seen in our building permits from 2020. The last piece I wanted to highlight for council that it was really exciting to see that 2 new doctors were noted in this, and we're going to bring more of those details back to council in the next month or so we can celebrate those pieces for our community as well. And just lastly, related to our staff training and development, we have launched both lean training within our organization. We now have over 25 staff people that are participating in that training opportunity. And we've also launched our LEAP program, which is our Leadership Excellence Achievement Program. And we have our first cohort of 15 people started that in September of this year. So like I said, a lot is happening in the town of Saugeen Shores. And thank you for indulging me with that brief update.
No, that was great. Thank you, Kara. Questions or comments from members of the committee? Councillor Smith.
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Mayor. I am a firm believer of what gets measured gets done, and this is a key example of many of those things that are being accomplished, no doubt in part to being measured. So thank you for your diligence to producing these key performance indicators and keeping us informed with these metrics. It's very refreshing as a counselor to see and be able to celebrate the accomplishments. And I just wish all of your staff, all of the town staff who've contributed to the successes, all the best in completing the remainder in 2021.
Thank you. Further questions or comments? Councillor Grace.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you to our CAO for such a comprehensive update, along with Councillor Smith. I really appreciate this summary for council and for members of the public. And I also appreciate your more frequent updates that you provide for us outside of the quarterly updates. It's very exciting to see the information about the new doctors. I know that that's going to be a great relief to many, as well as the second nurse practitioner that is included in that. I know that the cleanup from the September 7th storm has been very challenging for staff. And I know that you included in your report that we've applied to for a municipal disaster recovery program. I know that was shared with the public as well. One thing I particularly noted in your report was that I'm encouraged by referring to the official plan update. And I know many members of the public expressed concern in the environmental stewardship survey about trees and preserving green space and trees in our municipality. And I just wanted to point out that one of the comments in that is that the county is also doing work, and that the town is doing its official plan update in conjunction with what the county is doing. And in particular about trees, there's a comment in there saying that once the county maps the significant woodlands, the town can implement tools to protect them in a way that are more site-specific than the county tools. And I'm encouraged by that. I know our environmental committee is encouraged by that as well. And I know members of the public will be. So thanks again for a great update.
Thank you. Further comments from members? No? Okay, well, thank you very much, Karen. Excellent report. Appreciate it very much. That moves us on to the final one, which is an information report on grooming of waterfront vegetation and the Director of Community Services.
Thank you. And through you, Mr. Mayor, continuing with this conversation of trees, this report is in response to a deputation that we had in the summertime in regards to pruning of vegetation along the waterfront. Certainly over the years, vegetation along the North Shore Road and Miramichi Bay Road has slowly disappeared, and for various reasons that we're aware of. In cases where vegetation is requested to be groomed due to hazard or risks to users accessing the waterfront, then staff can assess the situation and provide the appropriate maintenance. Staff are currently developing a permit system in which residents can request for a tree or vegetation to be pruned, and it will be reviewed by staff. Alternatively, these requests can always be submitted using our Report a Concern feature on our website, and or simply contacting the appropriate staff person to review the request. I remind council and those viewers watching tonight that under the existing parks bylaw, we do have a clause in there that indicates that no person shall destroy, cut, mark, break, dig, pull, or burn of any or damage any vegetation at all, and the offense for such is a $100 fine. And finally, I wanted to share with you that staff will continue to find a balance of environmental, social, and economic interests along the waterfront. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for the director? Councillor Grace.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Jane. I really appreciate the fact that staff is moving forward with a permit system. I think that will allow for a really positive balance. And I think it's the right thing to do. So thank you for your work on this and the work of your team.
Thank you.
Thank you. Further questions or comments? I don't see any, but I'll just reiterate my support for the concept of a permit option. I think that's a good way to approach this. It gives people an opportunity to have a legal avenue to get done what they want to do, and in my view, limits the excuses for going out and doing illegal things and cutting trees illegally, which I think we all agree is completely unacceptable. And I hopefully, with this legal avenue through a permit system in place, we can also have, you know, an equal position where when somebody does go out onto municipal property, wherever it is, on the waterfront, anywhere in one of our parks, and cuts trees or damages vegetation, where we will treat that extremely seriously. It's vandalism, it's a crime, and we should, when we identify it, we should not hesitate to contact police and pursue charges because the public's land and the public's trees need to be protected. So thank you, Jane, for your report. So that brings us to the end of the Committee of the Whole, and we'll have announcements by members and the Deputy Mayor.
Nothing tonight, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, the Vice Deputy Mayor.
Nothing tonight, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Smith.
Thank you. Just a warm welcome back to the ice for the Saugeen Shores Minor Hockey Association and Saugeen Shores Figure Skating Club. We've seen upwards of 125 U7, just the little wee guys out on the ice, guys and girls this week, and it's really refreshing to see them back having fun on the ice.
Very good. Thank you, Councillor Grace.
Nothing tonight, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Carr.
Nothing tonight either, Mr. Mayor.
All right, very good. Well, nothing from me, so we'll take a motion to adjourn. Moved by the Deputy Mayor, second by Councillor Smith. All in favor? The committee stands adjourned. We'll reconvene at 10 after 8. I will call to order this regular council meeting, and the second item on the agenda is disclosure of pecuniary interest. Ask any member if you have one of those you'd like to declare. Seeing none, you can do that anytime if you need to. We have no additions, deletions, or amendments, no public meetings, so that moves us on to adoption of the minutes. And I have a resolution that council adopt the minutes of the council meeting of September 27th, 2021, and note and file the minutes of the Committee of the Whole meeting of September 27, 2021 as presented. Is there a mover and seconder? Moved by Mathen, second by Grace. Any questions or comments to either of those sets of minutes? Seeing none, all in favor? That's carried. That moves us to reports of the Committee of the Whole. And we just have one, and it is an infrastructure and development report regarding the County of Bruce Natural Legacy Stakeholder Workbook and the Connecting Link 2021 Intake 7 funding. And I have a resolution that council forward the completed workbook as the town's response to the County of Bruce's plan the Bruce Legacy discussion, and that council support the applications to the Connecting Links program for the roundabout designs, and that a copy of the application be forwarded to Lisa Thompson, MPP for Huron Bruce. Mover and seconder. Moved by Carr, seconded by Grace. Any questions or comments? Seeing none, all in favor? That's carried. Now we're on to reports of municipal officers and committees, and we have a staff report on the 2021 Municipal Modernization Funding Application Intake 3, and I have a resolution that council authorize a funding application to be submitted to the 2021 Modernization Funding Program Intake 3 for the 3 projects as outlined in the report. Is there a mover and seconder? Moved by the Vice Deputy Mayor, seconded by Carr. Any questions or comments to the resolution? Seeing none, all in favor? That's carried. That moves us to, we have no motions or notices of motion, so that moves us on to bylaws. And we have 4 bylaws this evening. Does anyone wish to have one of those withdrawn and taken out for individual consideration? Seeing none, then the resolution reads that the following bylaws are hereby read a first, second, and third time, and finally passed and sealed this 12th day of October 2021. 173-2021 being a bylaw to approve the submission of an application to Ontario Infrastructure and Lands Corporation for the long-term financing of certain capital works of the corporation of the town of Saugeen Shores, and to authorize the entering into of a rate offer letter agreement pursuant to which the municipality will issue debentures to the OILC. 274-2021 being a bylaw to authorize the entering into of a lease agreement with Dean Sands. 375-2021 being a bylaw to amend bylaw 103-2008 to regulate and or control traffic in the town of Saugeen Shores. And 476-2021 being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of the council meetings of the corporation of the town of Saugeen Shores. Is there a mover and seconder? Moved by Grace, seconded by Smith. Any questions or comments? Seeing none, all in favor? That's carried. And then finally, we have a motion to adjourn. And I have a resolution that this regular council meeting of October 12th, 2021 hereby adjourns at 8:13 p.m. Is there a mover and seconder? Moved by Smith, seconded by Carr. All in favor?